My husband secretly invited his sister on our honeymoon despite my refusal, so I ditched him at the airport and went on a solo trip instead. I, 28F, married my husband Jack, 30M, last weekend after dating for 5 years. The wedding itself was beautiful, but the drama that unfolded afterwards has left me questioning everything. Some background: Jack and his sister Emma, 32F, have always been extremely close. They're only 2 years apart and grew up basically as best friends. I knew this going into the relationship, and while I sometimes felt like a third wheel, I tried to be understanding. The issues started when we began planning our honeymoon about 6 months ago. We decided on a 2-week trip to Greece, island hopping, visiting ancient ruins, the works. It was going to be romantic and exciting. At least that's what I thought. About a month before the wedding, Jack casually mentioned that he thought it would be fun if Emma joined us on the honeymoon. I was shocked and immediately said no. This was supposed to be our special trip as newlyweds. He seemed to drop it after I explained my feelings, and I assumed that was the end of it. Fast forward to the morning after our wedding. We're at the airport, about to board our flight to Athens. I'm exhausted but excited. As we're in line to board, I see Emma walking towards us, rolling suitcase in tow. My stomach dropped. "Surprise," Jack said with a big grin. "I knew you'd come around once you had time to think about it. This is going to be so much fun." I pulled Jack aside and hissed, "What the hell is going on? We talked about this." I said no. He waved off my concerns. "Oh come on, don't be like that. Emma's been going through a rough time with her divorce and I thought this would cheer her up. Plus, she's already paid for her ticket and everything." I was furious. This was a complete betrayal of my trust and a total disregard for my feelings. In that moment, I made a snap decision. "You know what? You two have fun in Greece. I'm out." I turned and walked away, ignoring Jack's protests. I could hear Emma asking what was wrong as I left. Part of me felt guilty, we had just gotten married after all. But a bigger part of me was livid. How could he do this? I went to the ticket counter and explained my situation. The agent was incredibly understanding and helped me book a last-minute flight to Bali departing in a few hours. I've always wanted to go there, and figured why not make the most of a bad situation? I turned off my phone and spent the next 2 weeks on a solo adventure in Bali. I hiked through lush jungles, relaxed on pristine beaches, took a cooking class, went snorkeling, and did a ton of soul-searching. It was honestly one of the best trips of my life, even if it wasn't what I had originally planned. When I finally turned my phone back on after landing back home, I had hundreds of missed calls and messages. Some were from Jack, alternating between anger and apologies. Many were from his family, calling me selfish and immature. A few were from my own family and friends, concerned about my whereabouts. I went to stay with my parents for a few days to decompress and figure out my next steps. Jack showed up on day 2, flowers in hand and full of apologies. He swore he just wanted to help his sister and didn't think it would be a big deal. He begged me to come home so we could work things out. I'm torn. On one hand, I love Jack and we've built a life together. On the other hand, this was a massive breach of trust at the very start of our marriage. He prioritized his sister's feelings over mine and went behind my back to do something I had explicitly said no to. So Reddit, AITA for ditching my husband at the airport and going on a solo honeymoon? Where do I go from here? Edit, wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for the supportive comments and advice. I'll try to address some common questions/points. 1. Yes, we had discussed the honeymoon extensively beforehand. Jack knew exactly how important this trip was to me as dedicated couple time. 2. No, Emma didn't know I hadn't agreed to her coming. Jack told her I was fully on board and it was going to be a fun surprise for me. 3. For those asking about finances, we had separate accounts before marriage and had each paid for our portion of the honeymoon separately. I didn't take any of his money on my solo trip. 4. A few people have asked if there were any red flags before this. Honestly, looking back, there were some moments where I felt Jack prioritized Emma over me, but nothing this extreme. 5. To clarify the timeline, I spent about 3 hours in the airport between leaving Jack and boarding my flight to Bali. My phone was on during that time and I did see his calls/messages, but I was too upset to deal with it then. I really appreciate all the insight and support. I have a lot to think about. Update, it's been about a week since my original post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone again for their advice and support. It really helped me gain perspective and find the strength to make some tough decisions. After a few days of space and a lot of soul-searching, I agreed to meet Jack for dinner to talk things through. I felt I owed it to our relationship to at least hear him out face to face. The conversation was intense and emotional. Jack started by apologizing profusely. He admitted that he had majorly screwed up and betrayed my trust. He swore he never meant to hurt me and that he realized how big of a mistake he had made. When I asked him to explain his thought process, he broke down. Turns out, Emma had been struggling with severe depression following her divorce. She had even had some suicidal thoughts. Jack was terrified of leaving her alone for 2 weeks and thought bringing her along would help keep an eye on her. He didn't tell me because he didn't want to betray Emma's privacy regarding her mental health struggles. While I understand his intentions were coming from a place of love and concern for his sister, I told him that this didn't excuse his actions. There were so many better ways he could have handled the situation, talking to me openly, arranging for Emma to stay with their parents, even shortening our trip if needed. Going behind my back and ambushing me at the airport was never going to end well. We talked for hours, diving deep into issues in our relationship that I hadn't even realized were there. Jack admitted that he has always struggled to set boundaries with his family, especially Emma. He acknowledged that he often prioritized their needs over mine and our relationship. I shared how this made me feel, like I would always come second, like I couldn't trust him to have my back. I explained that while I care for Emma too, our marriage needs to be the primary relationship in both our lives. By the end of the night, we had come to some difficult realizations. We both still love each other deeply, but we have serious issues to work through if this marriage is going to survive. We've agreed to try couples counseling. Jack is also going to start individual therapy to work on his boundary issues and codependency with Emma. He's promised to take concrete steps to prioritize our relationship, including having some difficult conversations with his family about respecting our marriage. I've moved back home, but we're taking things day by day. Trust is going to take a long time to rebuild. I'm cautiously optimistic, but also trying to stay realistic. We have a lot of work ahead of us. As for Emma, Jack finally told her the full story of what happened at the airport. She was horrified and extremely apologetic. She's also agreed to start therapy to work through her depression and divorce trauma in healthier ways. I know this update might not be as dramatic or definitive as some might have hoped for. The truth is, real life is messy and complicated. I'm not ready to throw away my marriage, but I'm also not willing to sweep this under the rug. Only time will tell if we can work through this and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you again to everyone who took the time to offer advice and share their own experiences. It truly helped me find clarity in a really difficult situation. I'll post another update down the line if there are any major developments. Update 2, 6 months later, I've received quite a few messages asking for an update, so I thought I'd share where things stand now, 6 months after the honeymoon incident. First, the good news, Jack and I are still together and working on our marriage. It hasn't been easy, but we've made a lot of progress. The couples counseling has been incredibly helpful in improving our communication and addressing underlying issues. We've had some brutally honest conversations that were painful but necessary. Jack has stuck to his commitment to individual therapy. He's made real strides in setting boundaries with his family, especially Emma. It's been a difficult process for him, but I'm proud of the work he's putting in. He's learning to prioritize our relationship without completely cutting off his family. As for Emma, she's also been going to therapy regularly. She's in a much better place mentally and has started dating again. She and I have had some one-on-one conversations to clear the air. While we'll probably never be best friends, we're on good terms now. She's been respectful of our boundaries and even apologized to me in person for her role in the honeymoon fiasco. Now for the not-so-great news, rebuilding trust is a slow process. There are still moments when I find myself doubting Jack or waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's getting better with time, but it's definitely a work in progress. We finally went on a real honeymoon last month, just the two of us in Japan. It was wonderful and felt like a fresh start in many ways. But there were also moments of sadness, thinking about how things should have been. I'd be lying if I said I never think about walking away. The thought crosses my mind on bad days. But then I look at how far we've come and how hard we're both working, and I remember why I chose to stay and fight for this relationship. We're taking it one day at a time. There's no guarantee that we'll make it in the long run, but I'm cautiously optimistic. If nothing else, this whole experience has taught me a lot about myself, my boundaries, and what I need in a relationship. To those who advised me to leave immediately, I understand where you were coming from, and I seriously considered it. But I'm glad I gave us a chance to work through this. That said, I've made it clear to Jack that this was his one free pass. Any similar betrayals in the future would mean the end of our marriage, no questions asked. To those in similar situations, trust your gut, but also be open to the possibility of growth and change. People can surprise you, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad. There's no universal right answer. You have to decide what's best for you. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. It's been a wild ride, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds. Final update, 2 years later. I debated whether or not to post this final update, but I know a lot of you have been invested in this story, so here goes. Jack and I are getting divorced. It's not because of any one big dramatic event. There was no cheating, no huge fight. In the end, it came down to the realization that we want different things out of life and our relationship. The past 2 years have been a roller coaster. We've had amazing highs where it felt like we were stronger than ever. We've also had devastating lows that left us both questioning everything. Through it all, we kept working, on ourselves, on our communication, on our relationship. In many ways, the honeymoon incident was a wake-up call that forced us to address issues we had been ignoring. And for a while, it seemed like we were making real progress. Jack got much better at setting boundaries with his family. I learned to be more direct about my needs and feelings. We both grew as individuals and as a couple. But as time went on, we started to realize that maybe we had grown in different directions. The more we dug into our issues in therapy, the more we uncovered fundamental differences in our values and life goals. Jack wants kids in the near future. I've realized I don't want them at all. He dreams of moving back to his hometown to be closer to family. I want to travel and possibly live abroad. He values stability and routine. I crave adventure and new experiences. None of these differences make either of us bad people. They just make us incompatible in the long run. The decision to end our marriage wasn't made lightly or quickly. We spent months in therapy, talking through every possible scenario. We tried to find compromises. But in the end, we both realized that staying together would mean one or both of us sacrificing core parts of ourselves and our dreams. It's heartbreaking, but we've decided that the kindest thing we can do for each other is to let go. We still care for each other deeply, and in a way, that's what makes this so hard. There's no villain in this story, just two people who tried their best but ultimately weren't right for each other. We're handling the divorce as amicably as possible. No lawyers, no fights over assets. Just two adults trying to untangle their lives with as much grace and compassion as we can muster. To those who might say I told you so or that I should have left 2 years ago, maybe you're right. But I don't regret giving our marriage a real shot. These past 2 years have taught me so much about myself, about relationships, about what I truly want and need in a partner. I've grown in ways I never would have if I had just walked away at the first sign of trouble. I'm sad, of course. There's a grief that comes with the end of any relationship, especially a marriage. But I'm also hopeful for the future. I feel like I know myself better now than I ever have before. I'm excited to take some time to focus on myself, my career, and my own dreams. As for Jack, I truly wish him the best. I hope he finds someone who shares his vision for the future, someone who will be a true partner to him in all the ways I couldn't be. And I hope that someday, when the pain has faded, we might even be friends. To anyone out there facing similar struggles in their relationship, there's no shame in trying to make it work, and there's no shame in walking away if you've truly given it your all. Trust yourself. You deserve to be with someone who shares your core values and life goals. Thank you all for your support, advice, and kind words over the past 2 years. This community has been a source of strength and clarity during some of my darkest moments. I'm closing this chapter of my life, but I'm excited to see what the next one brings. Wish me luck. Update, 5 years later. I never expected to be writing another update to this story, but life has a funny way of surprising us. It's been 5 years since my last post, and so much has changed that I felt compelled to share. First, the basics. I'm 35 now, living in Barcelona, and working as a freelance travel writer. The dreams of adventure and living abroad that I mentioned in my last update? I'm living them. The past few years have been a whirlwind of new experiences, challenges, and growth. I've visited over 30 countries, learned 2 new languages, and found a career that truly fulfills me. As for my personal life, I'm in a wonderful relationship with a Spanish man named Alejandro. We met at a language exchange event 3 years ago and have been together ever since. He shares my love of travel and adventure, and we're building a life that balances exploration with creating a home together. We're talking about marriage, and this time, it feels right in a way my relationship with Jack never quite did. Speaking of Jack, this is the part that might surprise some of you. We're friends again. Real, genuine friends. It took time, of course. We didn't speak for almost 2 years after the divorce was finalized. We both needed space to heal and figure out who we were as individuals rather than as a couple. But about 3 years ago, we reconnected when we both happened to be back in our hometown for the holidays. We met for coffee, expecting it to be awkward. Instead, it was nice. We talked for hours, catching up on each other's lives and reflecting on our shared past. There was no bitterness, no resentment, just two people who once meant everything to each other, finding a new way to care about one another. Jack is doing well. He moved back to his hometown like he always wanted and is now a partner at a local law firm. He married a lovely woman named Sarah 2 years ago, and they have a 1-year-old daughter. Seeing pictures of him as a dad, he looks truly happy in a way I'm not sure I ever saw when we were together. And Emma? She's thriving too. She remarried last year to a kind man who seems to be a great match for her. She's expecting their first child in a few months. It's been heartwarming to see how she's grown and found happiness. Reconnecting with Jack and seeing how well he and Emma are doing brought an unexpected sense of closure. It made me realize that while our marriage ending was painful, it was ultimately the right decision for both of us. We're each living the lives we truly wanted, just not with each other. Some might wonder how I can be friends with Jack after everything that happened. The truth is, time and distance have given me perspective. The honeymoon incident that seemed so catastrophic back then? It was a symptom of deeper issues in our relationship, but it wasn't the unforgivable betrayal it felt like at the time. I've come to appreciate that Jack's heart was in the right place, even if his actions were misguided. He was trying to support his sister during a mental health crisis, albeit in a way that disregarded my feelings and our relationship. It was a mistake born out of love and concern, not malice. That's not to say it wasn't a serious breach of trust or that it didn't have real consequences for our relationship. It did. But I've learned that people are complex, relationships are messy, and it's possible to acknowledge someone's mistakes while also recognizing their good qualities. Jack and I both made mistakes in our marriage. We were young, we didn't communicate well, and we each had our own issues to work through. The work we did in therapy during those last 2 years of our marriage wasn't wasted, it laid the groundwork for the personal growth we've both experienced since then. I'm grateful for the time Jack and I had together, for the lessons I learned from our relationship and its end, and for the friendship we've been able to rebuild. I'm also incredibly thankful for the life I have now, a life that might not have been possible if I'd stayed in a marriage that wasn't right for me. To those who followed my story from the beginning, thank you for your support, your advice, and even your criticisms. Your perspectives helped shape my thinking during a tumultuous time in my life. If there's a lesson in all of this, maybe it's that life rarely goes according to plan, but that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes, the detours and unexpected turns lead us exactly where we need to be. 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined writing this update. I was heartbroken, angry, and scared of the future. Now, I'm happier and more fulfilled than I ever thought possible. If you're going through something similar, hang in there. It might not feel like it now, but there can be beautiful chapters ahead, even after difficult endings. As for me, I'm excited for the future. Alejandro and I are planning a trip to Southeast Asia next month, including a stop in Bali, which holds a special place in my heart now. Life is good, and I'm grateful for every step of the journey that brought me here. Thank you all, one last time, for being a part of my story. Wishing you all the best in your own journeys, wherever they may lead.